All right, thank you very much. That report by Dennis Temple was taken by Tokbe Alabi. We thank you very much. And now joining us for today's conversation on the impact of domestic fuel production is Olabode Shomi. He is CEO CAP3, member Group of Experts on Gas, Chairman Energy Transition Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association, and member Group of Experts. Okay, we've taken that before. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
A pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Henry.
All right, we also have joining us for the conversation, but via Zoom. We have Odion Omofoma, an energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire Group. Many thanks for joining us, Mr. Omofoma.
Good morning.
All right, let's begin from here in the studio. You know, there's so much talk around the Dangote refinery, the local refineries and all of it, the prospect that the cost of petrol will, drop as a result, and what seems like the dampening of all those expectations because the price remains high and not there. Can you help us unbundle all of this? Why are we still where we are? What are the issues around this local refinery thing, and why is it not making the impact that Nigerians are expecting it to make?
Okay. Good morning Nick, once again. I think fundamentally, one of the things that has happened with respect to the reportage and the discourse around it has been a mixture of of politics with the fundamentals. It's very much like the misinformation that happens around the power sector, but in a different dimension, or issues about climate change, which is both science and a lot of politics. Crude oil is a commodity. Like any other commodity, it follows the basic fundamentals of commodities. So whether it is gold, whether it's cotton, commodities, they are fungible. Their price tends to be uniform. So crude oil, it doesn't matter which blend it is, they tend to fall within a certain price. And that can be verified globally. The second part of it is that the process of purifying it, which is fractional distillation, which is basically refining, is also uniform globally. There are a few things that may differ, but they tend to be around the same price. So you could look at it this way. The cost of building a house is basically largely the same. It's the cost of land that differs. So whether I'm building the house in Abuja or I'm building it somewhere in Okitipupa or Potiskum, the cost of sand will remain the same, the cost of cement will remain the same, the cost of labor will be around the same. So even when it comes to refining, the cost of refining is about the same. So, and these are globally verified things. So what has happened is that in the reportage of the issues as it led to the Dangote refinery and all that, there wasn't a lot of proper analysis of the issues. There was a lot of propaganda, there was a lot of messaging, and as a result, Nigerians had expectations on a different pedestal. I remember about 2 years ago when they had just completed the mechanical works for the refinery. And the expectations were high and all that. And I was on TV with, on a different station, obviously. And the lady, the anchor, was very angry when I said that the price may not necessarily differ. And the fact is this, if it costs, for the purposes of argument, 800 naira per liter to produce a certain product, and you are selling it at 600, there are two things that apply. One is either the person selling it is giving you at a discount, or the person distributing it is distributing it at a loss. Because that gap of 200 naira does not disappear into thin air. Somebody has to take that cost. So at the root of all of these issues is that when you look at the figures that it takes to produce these things, which are basically domiciled in dollars at the moment, that's the one you want to get a global figure, you will see that it comes to a certain price. It is that price that keeps increasing. And why does it increase? It increases owing to a factor that is not part of the industry, which is the forex factor. If you check globally, the cost of petrol has not significantly increased over the last 10 years. There means some increment, but it's not been significant. The increase from us at our own end is largely as a result of the disparity between the naira to the dollar rate, which now reflects in the lives of what we have on the street. It's like even travel. Since 2005 up until now, the average cost for economy class internationally to Europe falls between $900 to about $1,200, depending on the season and how close it is that you're buying it. In 2005, it was like 180,000 naira. In 2024, it's over 2 million naira. But it is the same price. The difference is the fluctuation to the dollar.
But in our own case, one peculiar thing is that we take out to refine and then bring back. That same cost is what Nigerians see and say, okay, now because you have this within the country, you are not going to be taken out because everybody blames the importation cost for it. So why is that not making the impact? I think that's where the issue is.
That's on one end. So when you look at the total cost, sometimes a lot of attention, because the devil is in the details, a lot of attention has not actually been paid until what percentage of the final cost goes to transportation. I'm not sure it's up to 10 or 15%. But that has to be properly calculated. But where the issue is in the volumes. So even if it is 5%, transportation cost comes to 5%, and you are actually importing 30 million liters per day, it is in those volumes that the amount is large. But we should not forget that where the thing connects with the man on the street, that's where the rubber touches the road, is not in the total volumes that is being paid. It is in the cost per liter. So, for perspective, if we are importing 30 million liters, just for purposes of example, per day for consumption on petrol, and 5%, or let's say 10% of it goes to transportation, what that means is that if it is 1,000 naira, it means 30 million goes to transportation for that cost. But so if you remove 30 million from it, it basically comes to like maybe 700, 800, So to the final consumer, that difference may not be that significant. But in terms of the overall cost of what it takes to procure it, it becomes a dent. So it's in the analysis. So it's in the analysis of the figures.
Okay.
And that is what has not been properly educated. I mean, Nigerians have not been properly educated about.
All right. Thank you very much for your opening comments, Mr. Showumi. Of course, let's find out what Mr. Omofoma thinks about all of this. By the way, we're being joined also for this conversation by Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, a public affairs analyst. Many thanks for joining us, sir. All right, Abdurrahman.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay, Mr. Hamisu, we'll get back to you, but let's quickly find out the perspectives of Mr. Omofoma, an energy expert and CEO, New Hampshire Group. I'm sure you listened to Olabode Showumi talk about the fact that Nigerians shouldn't expect any difference in the price of petrol. I'd like to hear your perspective. Do you agree with him?
Well, yes, to some extent, no, because the main driver of the price for pump price is the feedstock itself, and the feedstock has an international value. The price is fixed; it hasn't really changed, like he stated. If it goes down, we should see some correspondent decrease. The no part has to do with the inefficiency that plagues the importation of petroleum products into the country, and that inefficiency is high, quite high. Well, so you might say yes, transportation costs is maybe not marginal, but perhaps maybe 20% or 10% of the cost of it. But the inefficiencies associated with importing refined product is actually one of the drivers or one of the sustainers of the price that we're seeing today. So hopefully with Dangote coming in just down the road from where I am, we expect to have a more efficient PMS distribution process that will ultimately drive down prices. We may not see the prices come down almost immediately, it's just starting, but we'll see prices at least level to a point where people will be able to afford it. Obviously, I'm not saying prices will come down to maybe 200, 300, 400, or even 600 naira per liter. But the inefficiencies in the whole importation process adds a lot of cost that we don't even see at the pump price. Where we see those costs are in the and the federal government when they are sharing facts. So NNPC comes with a bill of almost 6 billion naira. $6 billion to say, look, that's the cost of subsidy. So whilst we are more focused at the pump price, right, we're not seeing the inefficiencies that is literally bleeding the country. So that's why I'm saying, that's why I disagree with him to some extent. So once you take out the inefficiencies, you would see a lot more efficient pricing of PMS. Prices will drop, but obviously not to the extent that people expect it to drop, unfortunately. But at least we will not see the heat on the on our federation account where NNPC keeps withholding revenues. Take for instance now, we will not get any dividends from our shares in NLNG. NNPC would also not pay some form of royalties on its production. That it ultimately hits all of us, because what that means is that the accruals to the federation account becomes small or reduced. And what that means is that both the federal, state, and local government have less resources to utilize for their people. So once you look at it from that perspective, you realize that just a focus on just the pump price distorts the entire image and challenges that we faced with PMS importation.
All right, thank you very much, Odion Omofoma, for your opening remarks. We'll sure get back to you. Let's quickly get the views of Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, who has also joined us via Zoom. Dr. Hamisu, you've had the privilege of listening to Olabode and Odion Omofoma. I don't know if you agree with the analysis. Well, they have only a little disagreement between both, which is Olabode talked about information not being, quite available to the Nigerians, so at the level that it should be. And Odion Omofoma is talking about the government part of it. But the ordinary Nigerian really won't be bothered by all of this. The ordinary Nigerian wants to see a relief in terms of the pricing of the PMS, which is becoming a burden to many. What's your take?
Well, thank you very much for your question. I beg to disagree with some of the submissions that have been made, because in the first instance, there is no justification for this unwarranted suffering and untold hardship that has been visited on Nigerians in the name of servicing the oil industry and making PMS and other derivatives available to this nation. And I want to say that my take aligns with the thinking of Nigerians, that the devil has always been in the landing cost of PMS and other product in this country. The high prices we're paying has been attributed to landing cost and the parity between Naira and dollar international. In the first instance, for the fact that our economy is based on PMS and diesel, and we took ourselves out of poverty. You can't power a nation out of poverty when you continue to impoverish the people through dubious schemes that takes money away from them. And what do I mean by that? If we are not able to manage our refineries, it's our problem. We need to blame ourselves for that failure. It is not the failure of the masses. It is the failure of the elite. Secondly, I want to say, it was reported, I hope it is not true, that the state minister for petroleum advised that PMS should be sold at 1,000 naira or above 1,000 naira in order to curb smuggling. That as a nation, with the security agencies that we have that have almost interlapping functions, if we are not able to curb smuggling, it is the failure of the elite, it's not the failure of ordinary Nigerians. Nigerians should not be punished for the inability of the elite.
All right, Mr. Hamisu, would have to interrupt you there because we want to get your connection a little bit much better. And once we do that, we'll get back to you. And of course, I hear your thoughts and what you think, the positions of Nigerians, are as regards this particular issue. But let's get back here in the studio. And of course, I'd like to get back to Mr. Somi. Earlier you talked about the fact that this commodity is mostly traded in dollars, and that's why we are where we are, despite the Dangote refinery coming on board. So I would like to find out what you think about if the sale of crude in naira, which the president directed, would have an impact on the price. And on your earlier take, you said the prices would remain high, whether we refine or whether we import, and that the cost of importation is minimal. Then why do you think there has been, if you like, a deliberate attempt to stop our refineries from working?
Thank you. Those are three questions in one. So let me try and answer them chronologically. I will end with the last one on the deliberate, so-called deliberate attempt. So, in the first place, when I was talking about cost of refining, I was talking about it in dollars because of the average cost of maintenance and all that, and the fact that the equipment are bought in dollars and all that. Now, if the product is bought in naira, it puts a totally different game to the whole issue. What that means is that Dangote refinery itself is not under pressure to procure dollars, to get dollars in order to get its own product. It also means that they are going to get technically some kind of subsidy from the purchase of crude, because the price that they are selling the crude to them is not a revolving price based on the agreement that was announced. It was going to be a fixed price. In simple terms, if there's a fluctuation between the naira and the dollar, based on the agreement that they figure that they put in the contract, it's not going to affect them. So for Dangote refinery, it is an advantage in terms of their operational cost.
Profit?
Yes. In other words, the operational cost is totally different from profit, but it impacts profit. Profit comes, definitely is going to add to be profit. Whether that translates to cheaper fuel is totally an issue of an issue determined by Dangote refinery themselves in terms of their operations, in terms of their policies and shareholder values. It's still a private company. As to whatever price they are selling it to Nigerians, whether they are selling it to, or whatever price they are selling it to to NNPC, that's politics. That's gamesmanship between two different corporate entities who are doing business with each other. What we should just demand as Nigerians is to see papers, contracts that are signed. If there's such a conflict and so person is saying this and that person is saying that, if we were to go to arbitration on court, they should put it in play. If they are so interested in Nigerians knowing, they should make contracts available, and we should not be pawns in the game. As to the part when my dear friend Odion was talking about inefficiencies in importation, the question I would ask, what does inefficiencies in operations, importation really mean? It's a big word, you understand, but the point at the end of the day in all of these things is, at the root of all these things is that you have two corporate entities. You have NNPCL, you have Dangote. You have issues around them, and there's a gamesmanship like buying and selling. That should not be confused with the product being available to Nigerians at a proper price. But what Nigerians ought to know for themselves, which is where the knowledge comes in, and there's a critical mass of knowledge that Nigerians must have for it to be profitable unto them. I mean, take for example, a power sector. You ask the average Nigerian, I don't care, I don't want to know anything, I just want power. It sounds nice, but it's also ignorant. Because if you don't know where the key issues are, you will not be able to put the critical mass of pressure both on the government and on the players for there to be change. You will just be a victim of people passing buck among themselves. So that's that. As to the fact, it's not a fact, as to the common saying that the NNPC cannot get its refinery to work or the refineries cannot work, it's because people take Nigerian issues in isolation and they do not situate it within the context of Nigeria. NNPCL, until less than 2 years ago, was a government entity. The people there were civil servants. Take any sector in Nigeria, whether it's agric, whether it's health, whether it's sports, there are issues, imperfections with civil service and
I disagree with you.
Hold on.
I would not want you to say that.
Okay, fine.
Because I'm a civil servant myself.
Okay, I didn't look at it.
There's a level of perfection in what we do. So, but I mean, this is a critical sector, away from civil servants having to manage the NNPC before it became a limited company.
Okay,
Talk about the issues.
So my point is this. There are imperfections in terms of the culture of how NNPCL runs its operations. And that imperfections in terms of the conflict of the culture is what has led to it not being able to work. Some of it may be internal sabotage. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying some of it may be. Some of it may just be bureaucracy. But it is not technical. And it should not be assumed to be technical. So the point in all of this is that when you remove the red tape, that's the bureaucratic red tape, or the civil service, or whatever it is on that red tape, you will now see something to be more efficient. But more importantly, with the advent of the PIA, the NNPCL has been forced to undergo culture change. And with the pressure and the scrutiny that they are undergoing in the recent couple of weeks or months, especially with the advent of Dangote, they are also seeing themselves on the need to force to change. But what we are expecting is that a culture that has been imperfect for over 20, 30 years cannot suddenly be functionally perfect and efficient in weeks. So NNPCL2 must be given time, but within limit, within reason, and within targets for them to also meet to meet their own targets. But finally, and more importantly, there's a fact that is missing. Dangote completed mechanical works. That's the physical structures. And it took them 14 months plus after mechanical works for them to produce the first distillate. So if Dangote were the gold card, the standard in terms of operational efficiency and all that, and it took them that long, what about NNPC that completed mechanical works in December? Yes, they may have announced that they would do it in whatever time.
Repeatedly.
Yes.
Shifting.
Yes, they may have announced it. But there's a difference between what is political and what is scientific. So you can make political statements for the purpose of energy, for the purpose of excitement. But if your political statement is not based on facts, is not based on science, you are likely to have some of all these things. So those are facts of the ground. It's for people to make do with eat whatever they want.
You have mentioned politics in this whole mix a number of times.
Yes.
You know, I would like you to tell us, because a lot of people also think that at the moment, or rather before Dangote Refinery began to work, there were insinuations in some quarters that subsidy was still going on and all of that. Tell us, with what we're paying at the moment, would you say that there's subsidy or politics anywhere in all of these prices?
I think we should hear from Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu. Then we'll come back. Just hold that, munch it, think about it. We'll come back to get your response on this. Let's get Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu to round off his earlier thoughts. I understand the Zoom connection to him is better now.
The last question that was put by my brother and my friend, whether if there is politics in all of this. As important as energy, entire lifeline of every political organization, society, nation, whatever, is dependent on the modern economy. So the choice to punish the people, or the choice to make the people to work, to encourage them to the necessary incentive, it has to do with the policy of government. I was saying earlier, we cannot push the irresponsibility of the elite as the reason to justify the hardship we've inflicted on the people. Now, my has made analysis. There is one thing he has not told us. What is the comparison in terms of the management of oil resources between Nigeria and Mozambique, or Saudi Arabia, or Libya, or developing countries that have taken responsibilities for the production, distribution, and consumption of oil resources? What is talking about what you're taking 40 months to produce. It's an eternity, and we've not seen anything. So you cannot tell me that Dangote has is a build, maintain, and front of this able is the of the same desire. Cheap oil product has taken time to develop its own internal capacity. Marco oil field out of Saudi Arabia, technical services from which they are making money, and the product, the cost of producing this product we are talking about in Nigeria is cheaper in Saudi Arabia compared to Nigeria. After almost 60 years of discovering oil in Nigeria, we've not developed our internal capacity, and then one spot. If Saudi Arabia
all right, Mr. Hamisu, unfortunately your connection is not so clear. We hope that would improve. But let's quickly get to Mr. Omofoma now. I'd like to hear his thoughts about all that has been said so far, especially about politics and subsidy in the whole mix.
Now, the inefficiency to Lagos.
All right, Mr. Omofoma, unfortunately, your connection is not as clear as we want it to be. So I would come back to you, Mr. Alabadi, of course, because... We'll come back to you. No, because the pipeline here has been properly guarded, I guess, you know, for days. There's a little bit of interruption. But anyways, let's get back to you and continue the conversation. I actually asked you a question earlier before we got to Mr. Hamisu, and I'd like you to respond to that, because you mentioned politics in all of this. And, you know, that politics is what I would like you to explain properly in this, because we know that before Dangote Refinery started supplying to the NNPCL, it actually came out to say that the federal government was going to determine the price. And a lot of people, you know, I wondered why. That's comment should be coming from the Dangote refinery, considering it's a private entity and it has the right to determine what it wants to sell based on its production cost and all other factors. So, speak to us really. With this current price, and then with this whole Dangote refinery now supplying to the NNPC, and the price was seen in the market as at when it was 600 and something, there were indications in some quarters that subsidy was still being paid and all of that. So, explain that statement of yours. You actually mentioned the politics and all of this, okay. And then is there still subsidies anyway around this whole thing at the moment?
Okay, so I think the dictionary defines politics as the totality of actions and activities that people do to get decisions in their favor. So in their favor is not necessarily the same thing as being the right thing, just in their favor. So when Dangote Refinery announced that federal government was going to set the price, I think what was not done well in terms of the reportage was to get a corresponding view from government. Because government does not necessarily have to respond to everything in the media. I don't know whether government has said that, but probably the regulator will have been in a position, because that would be the de facto role under the law, to be the one to pronounce the price. I mean, if there were going to be a price restriction. So it is possible, and I don't know for certain, but it is possible that there is a difference in views on how the pricing should come in. It is possible. And the fact that somebody is not speaking does not necessarily mean the person is in agreement. I know we say silence is consent, but maybe morally, not necessarily legally. So that's why I said that in the mix of the pricing and all that, there's politics going on. There's an amount of gamesmanship. And until the facts are on the ground from all sides, we are not able to really see what the issues are. That's that about that. In terms of subsidy, to determine whether there is subsidy goes to the details. In other words, at what price is either NNPCL getting their product on the ground in Nigeria, or Dangote finally producing its product? So the point with that, why all of that is missing, is that it allows people with some knowledge and expertise to analyze things and say, oh boy, you guys are actually making 10% or 40% profit. Or you guys are making, because if the cost comes down, the cost at which is getting the crude. So you can basically analyze, and we can know the average cost of refining. So you can average and analyze all of that. So not making that available is basically more or less shielding their business or protecting certain things, which I say is all part of politics. Because politics is when you don't want backlash of ill will from people against you, either NNPC or all the players. So information is released piecemeal, only to the extent that it favors them. Those are all politics.
Well, politics can mean a lot of things. It also means governance. It also means, day-to-day activities, trying to make the lives of the people better. And I would rather see politics from that perspective, where it concerns the lives of the people being better. Now, many small refineries around the country are saying, look, we don't have access to crude. And as a result, we are underperforming. Why does it seem that there is so much opacity, which you have alluded to, and then why can't it just go round so that let's even satisfy local consumption?
Well, when it comes to the opaque nature, opacity in any business, or in any group of people, or in anything really, at the root of it is how people choose to do their things. For example, people say politics of governance, which is a different kind of politics, really, which we're talking about governance as being politics. People say governance is, politics is evil or politics is bad. But the truth is that it is not politics in itself that is bad. It is the way people choose to play their politics that results to ill will, cheating, fraud, and whatever and all that. Because people can still do the same politics of governance, and it will still be for the purposes and the betterment of people. So, having said that as a background, the key thing in here is that if the activities of people is not leading to the kind of progress that we want, there must be something inherently wrong with how we choose to operate and work and act as a people that is not bringing those results. So it is not the law in and of themselves that is wrong. A law cannot be wrong. Because, for example, for driving on the expressway, there are the dash lines where you can overtake. There is the solid lines where you are not supposed to overtake. But that does not stop a drunk driver from breaking all the laws. So laws are guidelines. The laws, the PIA, whatever, does not determine the efficiency per se. It just gives guidelines for people. It is still the people, the stakeholders, and the culture of operations of the stakeholders that would determine how effective the industry will be. So whether it be the DR themselves, whether it be NNPCL, whether it be the federal government, whatever, it still is going to get to the root and the facts of the matter. That is how they choose to play their game, how they choose to interact with everybody, that will determine what is going to be of ultimate benefit to everyone, including themselves, on the long run.
All right. Many thanks, Mr. Olabode Showme. I'm trying to, process everything you're saying. And, earlier when you spoke, you talked about that there's an average cost for the production of crude. I'd like you to tell us, looking at the average cost of production of crude and what we're buying at the moment, would you say that there's a transparency in the whole process? And then I'm asking about the transparency because just yesterday, or rather on Sunday, when the NNPCL started loading fuel, we saw a report about how much they bought from Dangote. Dangote came out with another statement saying, the NNPCL is being mischievous and all of that. So, because, the price is really what every Nigerian wants to see come down because it affects every other thing. All right, even the Gary in the market and all of that is affected by how much is paid to transport it to the market. So, do you think there's transparency, in the way we're dealing with this whole issue? Looking at first and foremost the challenges Dangote had, with having to access crude, the intervention of the president, and all of that, and then where we are at the moment. I don't know. Just make it clear.
Okay. When it comes to transparency, it's just about making information available in a way that is not blocked. So when you say something is transparent, that the window is transparent, means that you can see what is in there. Transparency does not necessarily mean you will like what you see. It just means you will see things as they are. So if we are talking about transparency in terms of cost of refining, that is something that belongs to the operator of that refining process, which ordinarily should be verified by the regulator. So that's where the balance is, that's where I sit. So if information is not coming from the operator in terms of its cost of refining, and there's no similar information from the regulator in terms of a balance for it, then you can talk about things not being transparent. And one of the reasons they may say is that it's not every information of a business that should be public information, because there's competition, there's operation. There are many valid reasons for that. However, as in this case, if the operational cost is critical to the life of Nigerians, and there is discrepancies in information in terms of the final cost, then the availability of that kind of information may be important. So it's just on the people that are operating to choose to do that business. To choose to make information available. And it is also on Nigerians, once they are knowledgeable enough either through civil society or through the media, to put a critical mass of pressure on the people who are concerned so that the right information can be released and Nigerians can make up their minds. The problem that has happened a lot is the fact that people make up their minds and then they are looking for information to validate the mind that they have made up of. Rather, they should look for information on what is really happening before making up their minds. And that's where there tends to be a lot of conflict.
Now, to what extent is the inability of production to increase, or for government to increase production capacity part of this issue? Is it possible that if we're able to boost our production, that we could begin to see some level of relief for the ordinary Nigerian?
So when you say production, are you talking about drilling or the finished product? That's the refinery.
The loss of crude. We keep hearing of stolen crude, loss of crude, not being able to produce to capacity. If all of these are resolved, that we are not losing to oil thieves, and we're able to maximize production, is it likely to impact the cost of crude to the ordinary man?
In a way, but not in the way that the question is being asked. So let me explain. So the cost of crude basically is not determined largely by the amount. It is determined by a number of factors, and one of the reasons why our own cost of crude is much more expensive than everywhere else in the world is security. So I remember Dr. Abdurrahman talking about Pakistan. I think I picked that up, and Saudi Arabia and their cost of production. But they don't have security cost as part of their own cost of production. Here, you need to employ military gunboats. You need to get some special security people. You need to have armored tanks. The whole set of things that people use for the Niger Delta when you want to operate it. All those costs doesn't disappear. It's built in. There's no cost of operation that disappears. It's built into the final consumer. Every inefficiency in the oil and gas sector is being paid for by the man that buys petrol on the road. Every inefficiency there. So, for production, yes, for every pipeline that is being interrupted, and people are hailing them either as whatever, it's because people don't understand how systems work.
All right. I'll have to pause you at this point because we have Mr. Odion Omofoma back with us, and this conversation ends in a few minutes. So let's just quickly hear his thoughts on the questions already posed to him and his response to some of the answers you have given us right here in the studio. Mr. Omofoma, we're with you.
It's questions. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
I said I missed a substantial part of the interviews or the questions. So you want to ask a specific question?
All right. Mr. Omofoma, we would like to hear your thoughts about subsidy politics, which, Mr. Labode had already spoken about. But we want to hear your own thoughts about all of this and what is playing out at the moment. And then if you think that all of this will get better once we get more refineries to work. All right, we lost the connection to Mr. Omofoma. Many thanks, Mr. Omofoma, for all the efforts, and we hope that subsequently would be able to get to you. But I'll let you round off your thoughts. You talked about security costs being part of this, but again, you wonder. Does it mean that Nigerians get to pay for that? Because when crude is being exported, that's not included in it, is it?
No, when crude is being When crude is being exported, it's not included in it.
Yes, because you have to sell at the normal international market price, right?
Yes.
So, but it's when the fuel gets to the average Nigerian, we now pay for the cost of having
Okay,
to.
so look at it this way. If you were to get 1,000 naira as income, and you now have to put security as part of the cost, and that income reduces to 600 naira, even though you're not paying directly, your income is reduced. So that's a form of payment. In other words, the amount that is spent on security ordinarily should have been cost benefit to Nigerians. It should have been it should have increased our income. It should have increased our income in terms of the amount in terms of the amount that goes to the operations. So, for example, if you take production sharing contract, they are going to produce, say, 1 million barrels, and Nigeria has maybe 45% of it or 49%, but depending on what their contract says. But if there is an extra cost to security, and that extra cost to security will have to have been deducted ab initio before they start sharing the cost. So if they had 1 million barrels to share before, and the total cost of security comes to about 200,000 barrels, then they are going to share 800,000 barrels. So ultimately, it is the final person that is paying the cost, even though it's not apparent. That's why I was talking about systems. So you see, when you talk about the digestive system or the reproductive system, the digestive system starts with the mouth, ends with the anus. You have your lungs, you have your alimentary canal and all that. So what goes into the mouth can ultimately affect the anus. But if you are not sensitive to that, you'll be taking anything into your mouth. So once we don't understand how systems operate, we'll think that one person's action, we don't understand the fact that it has compound effect and overall effect on everybody. It's that lack of systems thinking that does not make us actually appreciate the impact of what individuals do and how it affects the rest of society. And that is what is missing in terms of that. In terms of whether additional refineries and all that will affect, of course it will impact. It will impact in the area of competition.
Of course, competition drives down prices.
Yes, it will, not necessarily. Competition makes prices competitive. Because they are not going to sell at a loss. Mm-hmm. So because what Nigerians are expecting is not competitive price. It's not competitive price with what is the people. They're expecting lower prices. Mm-hmm. So competition will sell at prices that does not have excessive profit for those who are part of it. That's the big difference. So what we are expecting and we are hoping and we are praying that a competitive price will also be equal to lower prices.
So just before we close this conversation, what then can be done to give Nigerians some reprieve regarding pricing? How should it be done?
It's difficult for me to answer that question because, the facts of the matter is that if oranges sell for 20 naira, that's the cost of transportation, something for the farmer, fertilizer and all that. If it's 20 naira, that is the cost. And you are expecting to buy it for 10 naira. It's difficult to answer how that will happen. What I've just said is that it is important that we as Nigerians actually know what the real issues are. And part of the real issues is getting the details both from NNPCL and from Dangote Refinery. It's time people start asking questions, critical questions, rather than supporting someone and looking for information to back it. They should look at the information that is available. Okay, you are collecting crude in naira at so price. Why is it at so price? Those are questions Nigerians should ask. You are importing. Why are you importing? The refineries are not working. Why? People have said the refineries are not working. These are being shifted, and they are carrying hammer. Nobody is asking why. Because they want the head of the place to leave and all that. Yeah, he may leave, but will the system change? It's still a system.
All right. Olabode Shomi, CEO Captree, member group of experts on gas, and chairman Energy Transition Study Group of Nigerian Gas Association. We appreciate your time and thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir.
We would also like to thank Odion Omofoma, energy expert and CEO New Hampshire Group, as well as Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamis, a public affairs analyst, both of whom connection wouldn't allow us enjoy the real benefits of what they would have had to offer us. We thank you on this, all the same for your time on the program. Thank you very much for watching. Let's take this break and return to take a second conversation, which is on the halal economy. Please stay with us.